All right, we're here with Kaleb Redden on Cerebral Stick Up. Welcome to the show, Kaleb.
Yeah, appreciate being here.
Yeah, no problem. So, we know you best from the show Titans Games, that Dwayne Johnson's competitive athletics show. So, but tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, like what you do.
Yeah, so I'm a sports medicine physician. So I'm a doctor and I take care of um, basically the musculoskeletal system. So anybody who has a problem with a joint, a muscle, a tendon, a ligament, doesn't matter if it's neck or toes or anything in between. So that's kind of our realm. We deal a lot with athletes, with sports related injuries, with sports performance, human optimization, human performance. So it's a pretty broad scope and a lot of fun. I get to work with very high level elite athletes such as NFL, MLB, Olympians, pro bodybuilders, pro strongman, pro powerlifters, and then all the way down to, like kids soccer, fifth graders and everybody in between. So it's great. Weekend warriors alike. And then I have a few other part-time jobs. Along with my full-time job, I'm the medical director for the state of Idaho Athletics Commission. So I'm responsible for the combat sports in our state, for trying to keep those athletes safe, protected, helping with policies. And then I cover all of the fighting events in our state. So UFC, Bellator, front street fights, all the MMA and boxing, WWE, that kind of stuff. I work for Kaged Muscle as the team physician, team doctor, and I'm a sponsored athlete, and it's a supplement company. And then I work for the Mecca Gym as the medical director. So I oversee the personal trainers and help with their clients that have injuries or medical concerns to help tailor their exercise and nutrition programs based upon their injuries or their need for accommodation. So those are sort of the things that keep me busy during the week. And then I'm a dad. I've got 3 kids, 2 dogs, and stay pretty hooked up.
So a lot of hats you're wearing, definitely.
Yeah.
So, how did you get into like fitness, as a whole? Like, were your
Yeah.
parents into training? How did you, get into that?
So my family's, I grew up in a very small town in Wyoming, very like it's like 400 people, like very small and very isolated. And there we had kind of 2 different there's like 2 things. Like number one, you worked at an early age. So I got a job really early on in life. I was like 8 years old working irrigating fields. And then by the time I was 10, I was working for the city landfill, picking paper out in the sagebrush, but also sports. So I got into sports at an early age, played football, hockey, track and field. And I didn't really get into, I'd say, fitness until I was probably a freshman in high school. I was really overweight. I was kind of a bigger kid. And my parents, my dad was into weightlifting and running and biking. And, he basically said, hey, look, you can either be a victim or you can be the victor in your own story. And it comes down to your choices. And so I stopped feeling sorry for myself about being kind of a chubby kid and hit the weight room hard, started running a lot. And I went from being like an offensive tackle to being a fullback, and a wide receiver. So changing positions on the football field. And then going from being a shot putter and a discus thrower to being a 4x1 and a sprinter and a pole vaulter by the time I was a senior. And then when I left high school to go to college, I just continued in those patterns and stayed with fitness and lifting weights, and was an athlete in college, played sports in college. And then afterwards I got into bodybuilding and powerlifting to help out with that sort of competitive, aspect of life that I was missing once school was over. And I continued that through residency, fellowship, medical school, and continue that now.
So, I mean, that's pretty impressive. Would you say that your training kind of pushed you towards medical school, or is that something that you had even from an early age that you wanted to do?
No, I don't think so. My training and weightlifting and fitness in general has just always been part of my core. It's been my therapy. It's been my church. It's been, that sounds blasphemous. I'm a religious person. I go to church, but I find a way to rejuvenate my soul when I'm lifting. There's a lot of dark days in medicine that you have no way to deal with. Some people drink, some people go to therapy. I go to the gym. But that fitness is just a part of my DNA. That's who I've become over the years. Medicine was something that I got into because I was a damaged athlete. So I had some big injuries that kind of stole my identity from me as an athlete. I wanted to play football. through, into the NFL, but I broke my back, and so I didn't get to play. Even so, like in college, I went to play ball in college, broke my back, had to have surgery, lost my spot, and ended up on the cheerleading team with a full ride scholarship. So as a male cheerleader, not what I had intended to do, but it helped me to maintain my athleticism.
Right.
But having those injuries allowed me to then meet the team doctors for Utah State, where I went to college. The team doctors were like, "Man, what are you doing? Like, you should be a doctor. You've got the mechanical inclination. You understand anatomy, physiology. You really mix well with the athletes. You understand what the athlete's mindset is all about. You're great with there's sports performance, there's sports psychology. I was good at all those things in my classes. I had a degree in kinesiology. So I got a minor in chemistry, and then I had graduated college and went back to work in the oil and gas industry. I worked on drilling rigs. I was an oil guy, so I
Oh,
worked
wow.
in drilling rigs before and after college. And then after a year of working rigs, I went back to school and got a few more of like the prerequisites done and applied to medical school. And then the rest is history. But when I went to college, I did not intend on being a doctor. It's not something I grew up wishing I was going to be. A lot of people who get into medicine are sort of fast tracked to be doctors. Their parents are doctors or whatever, or they sort of know from an early age they want to be a doctor. And I was not that way. I was a very non-traditional, took a very winding path to get to medicine. But once I was there, I knew from the start that I wanted to be in sports medicine and be this type of a doctor, because there's so many different jobs in medicine, so many different jobs as a doctor, but I don't think I would be happy doing any of those other jobs. I think this is really the niche that I fit well into. So training has accented my sports medicine career, but I don't think that one led to the other, or vice versa.
I see. Well, I'll tell you this, I definitely feel better about going to a sports doctor that actually has done athletics in their life. It's very hard
Yeah.
to connect with somebody who's never competed or has trained, but they're a sports doctor. Not to say that you can't be good at that, but there's just a different understanding there.
100%. Like when I've been a patient, right? So like I've been in those shoes where I've gone to my doctor and been like, this hurts. And they say, well, stop doing what you're doing. I'm like, well, I can't do that. You're asking me to stop breathing.
Right.
Like, you don't understand. Like, I'm going to deadlift. I've had back surgery twice. I've got a deadlift. Like, help me find ways to accommodate. Help me find ways to change my deadlifting so that I can still do it. Maybe I can't do it the same way forever, but help me to stay with it. Like that's, I think, the difference between someone who's been in that world. That's just the eye of an athlete that you see. Like there's people who are in medicine who are phenomenally gifted, talented, smart. I mean, they understand the science, but they don't have that same level of mileage with the knowledge. And I think that that's the big difference.
Yeah.
So I'm in the same boat, man. When I go see the doctor, I go see a guy that lifts. Like it's a dude I train with. So yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. So like being a sports medicine doctor, what do you think is like the most common things that you see as far as injuries are concerned?
Shoulder injuries and knee injuries by far. And then probably lower back is a close third. And then we see a lot of ankle and wrist injuries. We don't see as many neck injuries. Those usually end up in the ER, right? Okay. So those are usually bad, but we do see those from different sports. I mean, I've covered football games and rodeos and motocross races where we've seen some bad neck injuries. But for the most part, I would say shoulder and knee injuries, especially from the clients that I see that are active in the gym. Shoulder injuries are really common with CrossFit and with weightlifters. And then knee injuries are just abuse over time. It's a joint that sees pressure every day. Unlike the shoulder, right? So the shoulder is a non-weight bearing joint. The knee is a weight bearing joint, and it's designed to carry that load, but it wears out over time and it's easily injured. So yeah, for sure.
When you say the shoulder is not a weight bearing joint, are you in essence saying that putting weight on the shoulders is injuring it as you do it, or?
No, it's just that when you're walking, your knees carry the load of your body, right? So load bearing or weight bearing joints are like your hips, your knees, and your ankle joints. Non-load bearing joints are going to be like your wrist, your elbow, and your shoulder. So those are joints that they only carry a load when you put a load under it. So like for us to move around through the day, you don't put weight on them. So they're designed differently. They're designed to the they're designed to have more mobility. Well, the shoulder anyway is designed to have more mobility but less stability, and so the muscles are actually used to stabilize the shoulder and to help move it, whereas the muscles in the knee are less so. They're more for power and for, you know, uh, dynamics, so moving your body in a more of a linear and non-linear pathway, whereas the shoulder is designed more for circumduction, rotation, internal external rotation, elevation, like all these different ranges of motion, but it's a less stable joint. It's like a golf tee with a ball, you know, and the muscles are what's holding that ball on that tee.
So what would you say, like, if there's like a young athlete and they starting out, like, what would you say that they need to do to lessen the potential injury effects of those types of things?
I think it's really important to warm the shoulder girdle up really well and to ramp up. So don't the biggest problem with people that I see that they tear up their shoulders are lifting too much too fast, too heavy too fast, or the wrong dynamics, the wrong range of motion. Um, Not that they're necessarily doing the lift incorrectly, but it's perhaps incorrectly for their biomechanics.
Mm.
So the shoulder is a very unique joint. It's, people don't realize that the scapular mobility is really important in moving the shoulder, and where you move the shoulder in space determines which muscle group you're actually using, whether that's rotator cuff muscles, deltoid muscles, pectoralis muscles, back muscles, like all of those muscles move the shoulder. And so understanding that and making sure that you train in a balanced way so that the fronts, backs, sides, and the top of the shoulder are all balanced is really important. So I think a lot of times younger, maybe perhaps more inexperienced lifters, they just try to go too big, too heavy, too fast, and they don't have that stability in the shoulder. And so then it allows the shoulder to move more, and they tear things like their labrum, they smash their AC joint up, and they can tear their proximal biceps tendon, they can tear the rotator cuff, and those are injuries that are definitely avoidable with the proper mechanics and the proper load.
It seems like biomechanics is now becoming like one of those things that people are paying attention to.
Yes.
I was listening to, I don't know if you're aware, but there's a former competitor. Her name is Miriam Nakamoto. She's a 8-time Muay Thai champion, and they were going back to her fights in the past years ago, and they were just looking at her steps as she's stepping across the ring, and and just pointing out all the terrible biomechanics that she had. Now she's a world champion 8 times, but because of that, now she has so many injuries, like with her legs and so forth. And I think now it's becoming like much more noticeable. Like people are paying attention to those things. Like, would you agree?
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you just think about it in a mechanical sense, if you have your car, right, and you have a ball joint in the front, the ball joint is what stabilizes the front wheel and the steering. So you'll have like a tie rod and a pitman arm that help to move independent suspension, right? If that ball joint is the wrong size, or if that ball joint is worn out, what happens is all the parts on both sides, the tires wear out, the tie rod arms, the pitman arms, all those things wear out and they break down. And so if you're hammering that tire on the road with that worn out ball joint or that inappropriate size of that ball joint, then it creates all kinds of havoc. Same thing happens in the human body. Like if you're forcing the human body to do things above the, the physiologic realm that it's intended to do, like, right. So this person's an 8-time champion. Like she's got the heart and the mind and the drive to do it, but perhaps her mechanics aren't in line with that type of intense requirements that she's putting her body through. There will be downstream effects from that. There will be parts that wear out. I mean, that's just unfortunately the truth of movement and the load that we place our bodies under.
What would you say is the best way to get information about it? So like, is it something that you can just look up online and find out how to move yourself, or how can you get that taken care of?
No, that is really hard to do, because even when you look in a mirror, you're only seeing 2-dimensional, right? So you really can't you can't watch yourself walk unless you're getting like a video analysis. Like you can't watch yourself move. Even when you're watching yourself squat in the mirror, you shouldn't be paying attention to those little things. You should be paying attention to moving the weight and having your eyes in the right spot. So really you need to if it's something that you care about and that you want to work with, especially if you're an athlete, then you need some help. So a lot of times it's you know, a biomechanist or a coach or a physician or, you know, a physical therapist or a physiotherapist, or even sometimes personal trainers. I'm iffy with that because some personal trainers have no real no real training in biomechanics or understanding of anatomy, truthfully.
Right.
You know, not that they're not good trainers, but they don't have, that's not in their scope of practice. So I think if you really truly care, like those are things that you need to get assistance with, because it takes a very trained eye to understand biomechanics and to use biomechanics. I mean, the people that teach biomechanics in college have PhDs, and you know, it's like engineering for the human body.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. So moving on to you know what people kind of know you on around as in the show NBC with the Titans games. So one thing I got to ask, they always like talk about how much you look like Thor from the Marvel. Like, was that so? Was that intentional? Are you like, did you try to mimic your look to look like that? There you go.
No, man, people have been calling me Thor for 10 years, man. As soon as the movie came out, people started saying, "Hey, you know, you look like Thor. You should dress up as Thor. It's Halloween." And I had little kids, and so I started dressing up as Thor for Halloween. Probably like, oh man, it's probably been 10 years ago. And every clinic that I've gone to, they're like, "You look just like Thor. You look just like Thor." So then it became, "Hey, has anyone ever told you you look like Thor?" to being like, "Hey, Dr. Thor." And then pretty soon it's just Doc Thor. It just kind of morphed into Doc Thor. And so, I mean, I've had name tags when I worked at BSU, at Boise State University, with their athletic department. They had a name tag that said Doc Thor on it. I've been published in magazines with, you know, dressing up as Thor for years. And so that was something that when they reached out to me, they were just like, "Hey, has anyone ever told you that you look like Chris Hemsworth?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've heard that before." It gets to the point. It gets to once or twice. I mean, there's been some funny experiences. I've even signed autographs for people, like in hotels, like a hotel lobby and like a lounge or whatever. In airports, like I've had people that were, you know, drinking, obviously, but they were like, "For sure, you're Chris Hemsworth." And the more I told them I wasn't, the more they were like, "Absolutely, you are." Like one time I was in New Mexico, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I literally had like 10 people. They were calling their friends to come down and like come hang out with Chris Hemsworth at this lounge, and it was ridiculous. Like I was signing autographs, but I ate for free all night. Like they just bought food for me all night long. So I was like, all right, whatever. I just started signing.
That's hilarious.
On everything they put in front of me. But yeah, it's been a pretty funny, I don't know, a pretty funny thing. And I think patients like it because it puts them, you know, at ease. Like I joke around a lot with people about it, and it makes it easier to talk to kids. And all the stickers that I hand out in clinic are all Thor stickers, you know, for the patients and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I've got another job for you. I know you don't have enough. So another one, you could just go to Comic-Cons and dress up as Thor.
Yeah.
That.
That's funny. Like I had a photographer who dressed me up as Thor and took a bunch of pictures of me as Thor, and like won a bunch of awards 2 years ago with her photos of me as Thor. And they actually submitted those pictures to Chris Hemsworth's team when I was on the Titan games. They had to approve if they're like, hey, you know, they're going to mention his name and whatnot. He had to approve of it. And so they sent those pictures in, and they're like, "No, you can't use those. They look too much like Chris. People won't be able to tell the difference." So
that's too bad that they wouldn't allow it. But at the same time, it's because you look so much like him. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. It's pretty funny. Dwayne Johnson was cracking up about it and taking shots at Chris Hemsworth about it. And I've never met Chris Hemsworth. I'd love to. I think it'd be cool to chop it up with him because I think he sounds like a pretty fun guy. But maybe, I don't know, maybe this will get around to him and he'll hear about it, and maybe I'll get a picture with him or something.
For sure.
Someday.
One day. Yeah. One day. So forward to the games themselves. So one, and you have to excuse me, I don't know all the names of the games, but there was one in particular where you won, and you were climbing a pole, and you had a very like specific technique I noticed of how you were doing it. Was that intentional? Did you think about it before, or did you just do it at that moment?
Yeah, no, I had when they go through and show you the events, you find out about it that day. So you really, you have time to think about it, but not really. Like it's kind of like they show you the arena. This is what you're going to do. And then, you know, shortly after that, you're going. So I didn't have time to like practice it or anything,
Right.
but I can swing a hammer pretty well, you know, like working on drilling rigs, you swing a hammer all the time. So I knew I'd be okay at swinging that hammer, but I thought about climbing that pole. It's pretty steep, right? So like, and as it juts out, it gets steeper. So when you start off, it's pretty low, but then it gets steeper as it goes. And so I thought, yeah, if I'm climbing underneath of that after swinging that hammer, my arms are going to be tired, and that pole's probably going to be slick. And if I slide, it's going to be real complicated. So, you know, anytime I've traversed a rope in the mountains, like I've done mountaineering and climbing, you want to try to be as efficient as possible. And so I knew if I could get up on top and use my leg to lock in to keep my balance, then I would take all the pressure off of my body. And if you watch through the whole season, I don't know if anybody else does it that way or not, but everybody who tries to go underneath and shimmy up, they're fast for the first third of it. And then once it gets steeper, they struggle bad. It's a lot harder. So yeah, I think I was able to complete that portion of it faster than anybody else.
Oh yeah. And it was, you didn't move like you did the way, so you moved up the pole, but you didn't move to the sides. You didn't, it was very like you said, very locked in, like it was just steady and all the way to the top. I imagine that if you're underneath, I mean, not only are you dealing with like the sore muscles at that point and the lactic acid, but also the gravity of yourself, you know, hanging off of it too.
Yeah, it ends up being a pretty difficult, and it's painted, right? So it's actually really slippery. And so like there was a lot of guys that I mean, I got to watch a few of the episodes now where they've repeated that, and there's people sliding all over the place. Like it's a lot harder to go underneath, but thankfully it was one of those things where I made that decision as I was going up to it, and I thought, well, if this works, great. If not, I'll, you know, plan B. But I think it'll work, and it actually did. You know, it work really well. I think you have to, like, that was one thing that was beneficial to me on all the events that I did. I looked at it with, you know, tried to look at it with precision and try to think, how is the most efficient way that I can do this, the fastest way I can do this. And I think everything I did, I had mapped out in my head and gone through and visualized, right? So before every event that I've done, I've visualized how it's going to go. And for the most part, it did for the most part. There's always those slip ups that happen along the way. They're unforeseen. You know, Mike Tyson says everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that's the truth. But having a plan going in, trying to be precise, is something I think that I've been trained to do over the years of my career.
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely strategy is important in anything. I mean, even Mike Tyson had strategies, you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But so on forward to the competition with Joe Thomas, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And so that was so close. I mean, it was so close. Now, obviously, you lost that one. Where do you think you could have done better?
Honestly, like for my body and my size, I mean, I only weigh 195. I'm 6'1", 195. And Joe Thomas is 6'6", 240, and he's big. He's just big. And I think if I would have gone against Victor Cruz or Tyron Woodley or, you know, somebody else that was more my size, I think it would have been a different story. But on that mountain, when you get down to the end and you're dragging that ball that weighs, you know, the ball is 200 pounds, the rock's 200 pounds, the chains, they probably had to be another 100 pounds. And then there's a plate behind it that's got a steel, like a steel plate on a rubber mat, so that creates friction. So I don't know how much the damn thing weighed, but truthfully, Joe Thomas could stand up with it and put it over his shoulder and lean forward. And because he was so tall, he created enough leverage that he could move it. And nobody else in the Titan games could do that, just because nobody else was as big as he was. So, I mean, that's where I lost it. Like, and you don't see it, but I actually passed out and fell. I blacked out and fell and hit the deck, and I jumped up and kind of was discombobulated, had to get my wits about me and start over. And so that me falling and crashing out, like, a couple people did that. It's because the floor is slippery and you're so tired at that point. And I think if I wouldn't have fell and if I could have, you know, moved that ball faster, I would have beat him. But yeah, Joe Thomas is a beast, man. He's huge. I mean, I don't feel tiny around very many people. I'm not a big guy. I'm 6'1", 195. I'm not huge, but standing next to Joe Thomas, I felt like a little kid, man. He was huge.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, I know you said you don't consider yourself a big guy, but you look pretty big, like on, on the show, especially when they had you, I think like flex. I saw one time where you were flexing. I mean, like you look like a pretty built guy. And I think you were, as I was watching that, I mean, you gained some time beating him, especially through the cage
Yeah.
climb, like up and down. He slowed down a lot on that. But like you said,
Yep.
when it came to that ball, by the time you were there, you were so exhausted, and I'm sure he was tired too. But
Yeah.
the size made a difference. His weight
Yeah.
made a
Yeah.
difference. So
Yeah, I mean
that's
that's
kind of
pretty
where he
much
won it.
it. If it would have been somebody else, I think more my size, it would have. But you know what? If he struggled in the cage, you're exactly right. So like maybe if I get against somebody my size, it would have been a different battle too because the
Hmm.
cage wouldn't have been as hard for him. But
Sure.
that cage sucks for everybody though. It's only like 18 inches tall, and you go down, up, or you go down, up, and then back down, and it's rubber, so you don't slide. So you have to push
See,
yourself down and crawl your
interesting.
way up. Yeah, you don't slide at all. And anybody who tried to slide just got tangled up and ended up somersaulting down the thing. And it's pretty claustrophobic. The chain's really small, so you can't really
Mhm.
even see out of it. It's an uncomfortable little
I,
maze.
I was gonna ask that. I was like, I guess somebody who's like claustrophobic would have a very difficult time doing
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah. Or if you're afraid of heights, because like you notice both of the bridges, like you pull the chains up off that one rod, and then the bridge falls down.
Hmm.
When you go to jump over that bridge, you can see straight down to the ground, and that's like 50 feet in the air. And then you do that crank in the middle, and then the other bridge falls down. As that bridge is coming down, I looked down and I took a step, and I could see right down to the ground.
Yeah.
They have a net down there at the bottom, but if you fell, you'd probably fall. I bet it's probably 40, 50 feet. You'd fall 20 feet
Hmm.
before you got caught in that net. And like
Yeah.
just looking at that creates a sense of like fear of like, oh shit, like I don't want
Hmm.
to like misstep and go down and end up in that hole because it's very abrupt when that thing comes down. So you're afraid of heights, not a good competition show for you, or if you're
So
claustrophobic.
so let me ask you this. So with you saying that, like, how do you get over that? Because I mean, I don't, you might not be afraid of heights, but like you said, it's uncomfortable. Do you just try not to think about it, just push through, or like how did you
I
do it?
mean, there was more than one time where I went to look. I like went to see the next step that I was like, man, I am way up in the air. It happened on chain link when I had to jump from the platform to the chains. I was like, I am up in the air, and it's like it takes your breath away for a split second. I'm not afraid of heights. I like heights. I like
Mhm.
jumping off of cliffs. I like jumping off of bridges. Like I like free falling. I think it's
Mhm.
fun, but it's a calculated risk, right? So like there's a split second where your body goes into that fight or flight mentality, and you're like, I should not do this. This is
Mhm.
dangerous. Like I should not jump across this bridge. So that definitely went through my head for that split second, but then it was like full send. We're going for it. And so then, you just move, you just keep moving. But you have to definitely internalize that a little bit, or at least I did. I had to just
Mhm.
kind of swallow that fear and just go for it and
Right.
hope for the best. And thankfully I never fell, but I mean, a lot of people did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting. So you get eliminated. Obviously, it's a sad feeling. How's that conversation with like your family going home? Like, what did you guys talk about?
And that was really, really emotional, really hard. Nobody ever goes to lose. You always go to win, right? But I've had enough losses in my life. I've had more than my fair share, so I feel I'm graceful in defeat as well as in victory. And I think that that's important, and that's a good lesson to teach your family because nobody wins them all. I mean, everybody wins and everybody loses. Like we all
Mhm.
have strengths and weaknesses, and you're gonna fall on your face. It's gonna happen. It happens in life. It happens in athletics. It happens in sports. And so being able to show my kids both sides of that was a blessing, truly. I mean,
Yeah.
a blessing in disguise. No one likes to tell their kids, it's okay, I lost, don't worry, we'll move on. But
Right.
it's also important to say, hey, look, there's no competition here, or there's no trophy for second place. Like it's
Mhm.
important to realize that there's no trophy for second place. You got to work harder. You got to, the cards didn't go your way. Instead of complaining about your cards, get a new hand and go back to the table,
Right.
and that was something I was able to show my kids. Like, look, I didn't win them all, but I did my best, and I'm going to hold my head up high and be grateful and confident and thankful for the experience, and move on to the next challenge and rebuild the foundation. There's no better place to build a foundation than rock bottom. So if you've hit
Mhm.
that spot, you just start building up from there. And so It was hard. It was emotional. My kids were bawling. I was bawling. I mean, everybody was bawling. The Rock was bawling. I mean, it was an emotional experience, but at the same time, it was a blessing because I got to teach some life lessons to my kids, and that's why I did that in the first place. I
Right.
went there for my kids, you know, that they got to have the experience of their life,
Right.
and it was definitely a bittersweet, but a very unique and good experience for them.
Mhm. Wasn't it like one of your kids, wasn't there, they said that her dream was to like meet The Rock or something to that
Yeah,
effect? It was
yeah. My daughter has a crush on the Rock bad. She loves all of his movies, you know, like Moana, and
Mhm.
you know, he's got a lot of kid movies, right? So my kids
Right.
have watched him in the movies for a long time, and my
Right.
older boys and myself, we all love his adult movies, and
Right.
so you know, my kids are big fans. My oldest son has autism spectrum disorder, and so he's a
Mhm.
little bit shy in public and has a little bit harder time
Mhm.
communicating. But he was super thrilled. He doesn't really get on camera very much, but he was having the blast. And my middle son's name is Titan, and so they brought Titan off the stage in the arena, and they were like, "We want you to meet Dwayne Johnson with your son Titan." And
Nice.
my kid was like, "Hey, thanks for naming the Titan games after me, but you spelled it wrong, man. Like it's Tytan." The Rock started laughing, and he's like, "Well, I better fire somebody then," you know. And then my daughter was like, you know, when she got to shake his hand and he gave her a little pat on the shoulder, she was like, it was a dream come true. She's like, you know, a lifelong dream to meet The Rock.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
was so cool too. He was so gracious. He was like, well, that's, you know, it's your dream to meet me. He's like, well, how cool is it that your daddy's out here competing? You know, like
I heard
he
that.
put the
Yeah.
spotlight back on me. And like, that just goes to show you how much of a stand-up gent Dwayne Johnson is, you know, like
Right.
he's the real deal. He's a cool guy.
Yeah, I think that's why people are so drawn to him, is because he's a, you know, obviously he's very successful, is very famous, but he's a kind of like a regular guy. He works out like we regular guys work out. He's a humble guy, like, you know, and I think that's why people like him so much. There's not a lot of
Yeah.
bravado there, you know. So
He can do it, you know, he can do it all. He can be like super cocky and arrogant, which is funny.
mhm.
He does it with a funny flair, which is like, that's kind of my personality too. Like I always joke that if I had any faults, it would be humility, right? But but it's funny. I joke about it
Yeah,
because I'm also humble and down to earth. And I think that's a huge part of why people relate to Dwayne Johnson. He has made fitness commonplace cool, right? Like
absolutely.
he has made fitness cool. You don't have to be an elite powerlifter bodybuilder to be a cool fitness guy. Like you can be an everyday Joe like us and be a fitness guy, and
Yeah,
that's cool. And he's kept it cool to be a dad, and he's kept it about family, and he's definitely always hungry and pushing for the next level, but he's not become a pompous asshole in doing so. He's
right.
maintained his integrity and his roots, and people appreciate that. It doesn't matter what field you're in. Like those things matter to people and are good things to remember. Integrity and humility are important. I mean, I'm a physician, which is a, a, a prestigious, if you will, position,
Mhm.
right? Like that's something that people respect the title.
Mhm.
But every Wednesday morning, I go to the gym and I work as a janitor for free. I clean the
Oh
floors of my
wow.
son for 4 hours. Like we spend 4 hours cleaning the gym. It's my son's first job. He's 14. He's getting his first job, and so I was like, look, I'll go clean with you. I don't get paid for it,
Mhm.
but I go and I clean the gym. I have that mentality of ownership and of the place where I work out, and it's one of the best 4 hour time blocks of my week. Being able to just go and clean floors and clean equipment, and people stop me and like, what are you doing? Like, you're a doctor. Why are you cleaning the floors? Like they pay janitors to do that. I'm like, yeah, this is my son. He's one of the janitors. Like I'm helping him out today. And it's awesome. Like there's no better feeling than doing good for the right reasons. And
Right.
you got to
Right.
remember that, I think, throughout your dreams and you're
Yeah.
chasing your greatness.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that about being a doctor in the United States, especially. It might be, it's a little different in other areas, but it's considered, like you said, a prestigious job. And sometimes people think of doctors as being very cocky and so forth. And
Yeah.
like for me personally, like we talked about how important it is to have a sports medicine doctor that's done it. It's also important that my doctor is like a real person and is like a
Yep.
genuine guy. And that's, you know, because it's like it's hard to relate your issues, medical or whatever, to someone who's not genuine.
Oh,
it's just difficult to
absolutely.
do that, you know.
Yeah, disingenuine or inauthenticity
Right.
is a huge downfall, and you can't. That's another thing. Like with medical school, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that was not prioritized at all.
Mm-hmm.
They cared more about grades, intellectual ability, and your ability to perform, right? And they realized that people got sick of doctors that were like that. They had
Right.
no way to relate to people, and so they became and it's definitely a huge shift in medicine now. Like now is much more um, it's much more coveted to have someone who's a people person who can
Mm-hmm.
understand communication and can relate to people and
Right.
have empathy.
Right.
Because that you're exactly right. Like if you can't relate to your physician, you end up not trusting them very much, and they don't trust you very
Right.
much, and then treatment plans don't go as well. And it's
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely a role for that. And I think that having a non-traditional path is definitely something that's helped me. Like when a truck driver comes in and says his back hurts, like I understand what that's like because I was a truck driver. Like I jammed gears for years. I know what that's
Mm-hmm.
like, and I understand how to help them because I've done that. So I think that's
Yeah.
definitely beneficial. Any field that you're in, if you can relate, no one wants to go see a personal trainer that doesn't work out, right? So like, yeah, that doesn't work. I mean, they say you
Yeah.
never should trust a skinny chef, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly. 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 No, you're absolutely right. Well, hey, Kaleb, thank you so much for your time. I know you're a very busy man. If somebody wanted to contact you for collabs, advice, whatever that
yeah,
they might want to contact you, how would they
sure.
do it?
So I'm relatively a narrow scope. So I have an Instagram account. My Instagram name is muscledoc_kr. Um, but really that's truthfully the only social media outlet that I use. I
Okay.
have a Facebook account. I haven't checked it in years. Don't have Twitter. I don't have anything else. The truth is I just, as you said, I'm so busy. I take time to invest to build content through social media, through Instagram, but that's pretty much it. So feel
Gotcha.
free to reach out through Instagram, muscledoc_kr. And I do really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today, and I'm grateful for this, and hopefully that this is beneficial for you and for your listeners as well. And,
Absolutely.
thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I definitely think it will be beneficial. Guys, if you like the content, you like the video, subscribe and like below. And Kaleb, again, thank you so much for your time. And you have a great rest of the day.
You too, brother. Take
Take
care. Be
care.
safe.
You too.
See ya.